Welcome to the Industrial Revolution's notes for World History 2. Remember that you can start and stop the video or pause it at any time that you need to. So Charles Dickens says it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And we're going to look at why, and we're also going to look at how the Industrial Revolution began in England during this part. Okay? So, life before the Industrial Revolution was really difficult. A lot of people lived in rural areas, which means out in the countryside and in small little villages. Okay, there were very high levels of disease. People were dying of pneumonia and smallpox, and there wasn't a lot of medicine for them, so that was a big reason. So they had really high infant mortality, which means that infants were dying before they reached age 2. So a woman could have maybe 15 kids over her lifetime, not all at the same time, but not all of them would survive to adulthood. And then life expectancy was also about 40 years old. So think about how old your parents are. Okay, if you were during the Industrial Revolution, if your parents are over 40, they would be really old during that time period. So most people didn't know their grandparents during that time period because of the age differences. The key industry for most of the world was agriculture, but especially for England. So a lot of people were farming. People lived in small villages. And there was not a lot of movement of people from villages to towns and cities. Most people didn't move away from where they were born, maybe more than a mile. Some people didn't even travel more than a mile away from where they were born. So that's going to be a really big thing that's going to change after the Industrial Revolution happens. So our rural area looks kind of like this. Okay, the green lands, the sheep all over the place. Our little villages look kind of like this. Houses might have 2 to 3 rooms, maybe a bedroom and a main room. That would be the kitchen and the living room, where everybody would kind of work and play and eat and function like that. And then we also have, so that's most everybody, maybe 90% of the population. And then the other 10% are the wealthy aristocrats, and they are the large, powerful landowners, so they own most of the land. And they own lots of land. They are very wealthy and they live on large estates and big, big houses. And they rent their land out to small farmers to make a profit. And the small farmers will farm the land, and then at harvest time they owe a certain amount of their harvest to the landowners to help pay for their harvest, or to pay for their rent, essentially. So this is a picture of a house called Bantry House. It's in Ireland, southwestern Ireland, and you can see how big the house is. It's got the wings on either side, and then it's got basically 2 more buildings towards the bay. They have many, many rooms. They have 2 living rooms, they have a library, they have a ballroom, and then today it's a bed and breakfast. And so we stayed in here on our trip to Ireland with my family, and our bedroom was the little window that you can see right by the over here, which was kind of cool. On the right wing, if you can't see my cursor. And the stables are over here to the far right, and you go back up the hill, and if you go even further up the hill, behind where I'm standing to take the picture, you would get to all of the farmland, which is where the Bantry family would rent out to tenants. Okay, here's a picture of just some aristocrats, and notice how they dress. Okay, they're wearing velvet and silk and very fancy clothing. Okay, a different style than what you would see in the rural and the common people of the time. So, let's talk about farming. Farming is going to be a sun-up to sundown affair, which means you start working when the rooster crows and you go to bed when the sun goes down. Remember, they don't have electricity at this point, so their light is going to be either candles or maybe an oil lamp if they're lucky. The entire family is going to work on farming. This is why they have a lot of kids to help on the farm. So the men and the boys are going to be out in the field working or on the workbench. The women and the girls are going to be working milking cows and doing household duties and all the things like that. The public lands are what are part of English society. It's also sometimes called common land. And it's the land owned by the government where poor farmers can graze their livestock and farm. So most people would kind of have 2 different jobs. Maybe they farm land for their landowner, for the wealthy, and that gets given to them. And then they also have some animals that they put on the public land, or maybe farm some part of the public land for their own food. So that's going to be how things are working. Here's a picture of how farming was done. Most people would work together to harvest because it takes more than one family to harvest, and so they would kind of move field to field in the village. Now, the second industry for England is going to be wool, okay, so sheep farming. And so there's going to be a huge increase in population, which means that the demand for British wool, what you make clothing out of during that time, is going to increase during the 1700s, and there should be an S on this. Whoop. 1700s, sorry about that. So because we have more people, we need to clothe them so they're not going naked, and so we need to have a lot of wool. Wool comes from sheep. And so what they use to take the essentially the fur of the sheep, or the wool of the sheep, is they cut it off the sheep. It doesn't hurt, it's like a haircut, and they use what's called the domestic system to turn it into cloth. And so in the domestic system, remember domestic means home, merchants are going to hire workers to produce wool in their houses. And this is what is used all across Europe as well as in England. So how do you do the domestic system? Well, the merchants are going to hire workers to produce the wool in their homes. And so the merchants are buying the wool, the raw wool fibers from the farmers. They're going to deliver the raw fiber to the families in the town, however much they get. And then at home, the women and children are going to clean and spin the fiber into yarn or thread. So you have to basically take really big hairbrushes and run them together over the wool so that everything straightens out, because it's a big mess when you get it, and clean it so that you don't have any leaves or twigs or anything in it. And then you spin it on either a drop spindle or a spinning wheel, and that creates the thread that is then given to the loom, which the men use to weave the thread into fabric. And so this is the process that they're going to go through. And so you're going to be paid by the amount that you produce. So when the merchant returns in a week or a month or however long, you're going to get a certain amount of money based on what you have produced in that amount of time, and then you get more fiber and you repeat the process. Now there are some benefits of the whole system. The first benefit is that families get to set their own hours, their own working hours. If you want to start at 8 a.m., you start at 8 a.m. If you want to start at 10 a.m., you start at 10 a.m. But you have to remember you get paid based on what you produce. So you might want to work a little bit longer. They also get to work at home. So if you have laundry to do or if you need to make dinner, you can still do that, and you're all working together. So there's kind of a collective community feeling. And then you also have the ability to do other chores or farm to make a little bit of extra money. So if you want to work in the domestic system and produce wool at your home and have a loom at home, you can also go and farm maybe some of the public land, or have a little part of the landowner's land that you use as well. So that's how people work. People mostly have 2 to 3 jobs at this time period. And here's a picture of the domestic system. So you can see the littlest girl in the back without shoes is doing what's called carding the wool, running it through the big hairbrush-like things. And then the girl over to the left is using the spinning wheel to spin all of the raw fiber into thread. You can see the raw fiber that she has in her hand, and it's going into the spinning wheel to create thread that then the father uses to weave on the loom and make into cloth. Now, the last industry that they have in England, which you saw on your map that we did in class, is mining. The mines are often under the farmlands. Okay, so it's not like they have huge mountains and they go dig into the mountains. It's just kind of like the rolling hills that you might see if you go further west out into Virginia. And the miners are going to be double workers, so they're working in the fields during harvest times, and then they're mining at other times. And many times the whole family is involved in mining, and so the little kids are the ones that can go down in the smaller tunnels because they're smaller people and get the coal out or get the copper out or iron or whatever you're mining for. Here's a picture of what's coming out of the mine. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you can see the hole that goes into the mine. It's pretty dangerous work, okay? It's not very safe. The mine might collapse. If you're pulling out coal, sometimes when you break the coal apart, you get dust in the air. And if you breathe that in, you get what's called black lung, okay? So it's not a healthy thing. You can see 2 guys over here on the right are miners, and there's 2 guys in front of the wagons carrying everything that they've gotten out of the mine, being pulled by a horse. So that's what's going on. So what is the Industrial Revolution? You want to paraphrase this, which means you don't want to write everything. You want to think about how you can shorten this but still get the full meaning. So the Industrial Revolution is a period from 1750 to 1850, and that's approximate, where changes in agriculture, manufacturing, mining, transportation, and technology had a profound effect on the social, economic, and cultural conditions of the times. So think about how you would paraphrase that. Take a second, pause the video, and write it down. And then go ahead and restart the video, obviously, and compare with your neighbor if you're in class, or compare with a friend if you're not in class, and see how you paraphrased it. Maybe you said 1750-1850, changes in agriculture, manufacturing, mining, transportation, technology equals big change on social, economic, cultural conditions. Or maybe you shortened it a little bit more from that. Alright, so we're going to stop the video there. We'll do a second video for why industrialization began in England for the second part of the notes.